It was a muggy night in March 2025, and Maple Street in Los Angeles was wrapped in the kind of quiet that settles over a suburb after dark. Most folks were inside, scrolling their phones or nodding off to late-night reruns. But not Elon Musk. At 53, he'd already turned the world upside down a few times: PayPal, Tesla, SpaceX, the works. Now, he was back in that same old garage on Maple Street, the one that kicked off the Roadster years back, messing with something new. Whatever it was loud, freaky, and turning the night into a light show nobody asked for. Inside the garage, Elon was bent over a workbench, surrounded by a wild mess of wires, glowing tubes, and a big, clunky machine that looked like someone mashed up a vacuum cleaner with a jet engine. His hair was grayer but still a mess, and his jacket was dusted with some weird metallic powder. The air snapped with static as he twisted a dial on the device. A low hum kicked in, then jumped to a high-pitched whine. Then, flash, a burst of light blasted out, so bright it lit up the whole garage. Elon squinted, grinned, and jotted something in a notebook already crammed with sketches and numbers. Elon, if I can tweak the intake, bump up that conversion rate, this could be it. This could be the one. He wasn't talking about cars or rockets. Not this time. The notebook showed towers with strange vents, arrows swirling around them, and scribbles that didn't make much sense yet. It was classic Elon, chasing something so out there, most folks wouldn't even know where to start guessing. Across the street, a light popped on in Harold Jenkins' house. Harold, pushing 70 now, moved slower these days, his white hair thin, but his temper hadn't mellowed a bit. He shuffled to the window, peering out at the garage. That flash had yanked him out of a shaky sleep, and now the humming was rattling his teeth. He rubbed his eyes, scowling as another burst of light cut through the dark. Harold. That damn Musk again. What's he cooking up now? Fireworks? Some alien crap? Can't he just cash out and disappear like a normal billionaire? He pulled on an old Rogue, same ratty one from years back, and hobbled downstairs, grumbling with every creaky step. A photo on the wall caught his eye as he passed, him at the factory, younger, prouder, back when he built stuff that didn't keep him up at night. These days, he just wanted quiet, peace after a lifetime of noise. But Elon Musk next door? That was a one-man wrecking crew for any hope of calm. Harold Jenkins was a throwback, a retired machinist who'd spent 30 years on the factory floor, tightening bolts and dodging deadlines. He picked Maple Street to escape the racket, to live out his golden years in silence. But with Elon as a neighbor, that was a pipe dream. The guy didn't just tinker, he unleashed chaos, and tonight was shaping up to be a doozy. Harold leaned on the kitchen sink, staring out through a smudged window, hands gripping the edge. The garage lights pulsed like they were breathing, casting weird shadows across his yard. The hum got louder, odd, like the air itself was buzzing. Then, flash. Another light burst, followed by a whoosh that shook the glass. He cursed loud enough to wake the dead. Harold. Hey! Musk, you lunatic! What's with the light show? Some of us are trying to live here. Elon flipped a switch inside, dialing back the hum. He stepped out, brushing off his hands, and squinted across at Harold's shadow. With that same restless glint in his eyes, he strolled over. Elon. Hey, Harold. Didn't mean to wake you. Testing something new, something big. Harold stuck his head out the window, jabbing a shaky finger. Harold. Big? You're gonna give me a stroke first. What's that thing in there? Another one of your nutty gadgets? Elon. Yeah, but this one's different. It's not about leaving the planet, it's about fixing it. Harold blinked, caught off guard. He'd heard Elon ramble about electric cars and Mars before. But fixing the planet? That was a new one, and it sounded like bull to him. Harold. Fixing it? Sounds like a load of crap. Keep it down, or I'm calling the cops. Again. Elon nodded unbothered, and headed back to the garage. Elon. Call and if you gotta. But this might be worth the noise, trust me. Harold slammed the window shut, muttering as he shuffled to the phone. He dialed the cops, falling back into the old routine. Harold. Yeah, it's Jenkins on Maple Street. Musk said it again. Lights flashing, noise like a damn jet taking off. Can't you haul him away? The operator sighed over the line. We'll check it out, Mr. Jenkins. Harold hung up, glaring out as red and blue lights rolled up the street. 2 cops knocked on the garage door, and Elon opened it, shaking dust off his jacket. Officer 1. Mr. Musk, we've got another complaint. What's happening in here? Elon. Just an experiment. Something to shake things up, hopefully for the better. Officer 2. Well, it's shaking up the neighborhood. Tone it down, people need sleep. Elon gave a half shrug, that stubborn spark flashing in his eyes. The cops left, and he shut the door, turning back to the machine. Elon. 1 solid run, and they'll get it. This is the start. He fired it up again, quieter this time, but the hum still slipped out. Harold climbed back into bed, yanking the covers up. The buzz wormed through the walls, faint but there. Harold. He's gonna kill me with this nonsense. Never gonna work. Guy's off his rocker. Harold drifted off, dead sure Elon was chasing another wild goose. But what if that noise wasn't just craziness? What if it was the first rumble of something nobody saw coming, something that had changed more than just Maple Street? That night, as the garage hummed and the block griped, a spark lit up. Something wild. Something that'd rewrite what came next. The morning after that first freaky night in March 2025 didn't bring any peace to Maple Street. If Harold Jenkins thought 1 call to the cops would shut Elon Musk down, he was dead wrong. That garage across the street didn't just keep humming. It got louder, weirder, and more relentless. For Harold, it was like a bad dream that wouldn't let him wake up. For Elon, it was fuel to keep pushing whatever wild thing he was cooking up in there. And the clash between them? It was only getting started. Harold dragged himself out of bed at dawn, eyes bleary from a night of tossing and turning. The buzz from the garage had drilled into his skull all night, faint but constant, like a mosquito he couldn't swat. He shuffled to the kitchen, brewed a fresh pot of coffee, determined to drink it hot for once, and glared out the window. The garage lights were still on, flickering through the cracks, a stubborn sign that Elon hadn't even paused. Harold dumped sugar into his mug, stirring hard as he muttered to himself. Harold. Kid's still at it. What kind of maniac doesn't sleep? He's gotta be running on batteries or something. He didn't know how close he was to the truth. Over in the garage, Elon was sprawled across the workbench, surrounded by a tangle of glowing tubes and that hulking machine. His jacket was off now, sleeves rolled up, and his hands were smeared with that strange metallic dust. The device was humming louder than last night, a steady, pulsing drone that vibrated the air. He adjusted a valve, and the hum spiked, shaking the tools on the table. A faint shimmer rippled out, like heat off asphalt, and Elon's eyes lit up. Elon. There we go. Hold that pattern, just a little more juice, and we're in business. He wasn't kidding around. Whatever this thing was, it wasn't a side hustle, it was an obsession. The notebook next to him was open to a fresh page, scribbled with graphs and arrows pointing to something labeled intake flow. He was chasing a breakthrough, and every tweak, every buzz was a step closer. But for Harold, every sound was a step closer to snapping. By midday, the noise kicked up a notch. The hum turned into a grinding whir, like a blender chewing gravel. Harold, who'd been trying to nap on the couch, bolted upright, coffee spilling onto his robe. He stormed to the window, yanking the curtain back just as, flash, a burst of light shot out of the garage, bright enough to make him squint. He cursed, loud and long, and grabbed his cane. Harold. That's it. I'm done with this crap. He hobbled across the street, cane thumping on the pavement, robe flapping like a battle flag. He banged on the garage door, hard enough to dent it if it weren't already beat up. It creaked open, and Elon poked his head out, goggles fogged with steam, holding a wrench like it was a trophy. Harold. Musk, you've lost it. I didn't sleep a wink last night, and now you're blinding me in broad daylight? What the hell's this thing supposed to be? Elon wiped his goggles with his sleeve, stepping out into the sun. He looked at Harold, that half smirk creeping onto his face. Elon. Hey, Harold. It's not about blinding you. It's about fixing something broken. Wanna take a peek? Harold hesitated, thrown off by the offer. He leaned in, squinting past Elon. The garage was a mess, wires everywhere, that machine hulking in the center, its tubes glowing faintly. The air smelled sharp, like ozone after a storm, and the hum was steady now, almost alive. It didn't look like anything Harold knew, not a car, not a gadget, just weird. Harold, fixing something? Looks like a pile of junk to me. You're just making noise for nothing. Elon, not for nothing. If this works, it'll change the game. Give it time, you might like the result. Harold snorted, turning to hobble back home. Harold, change the game? Only game you're playing is driving me nuts. Keep it quiet, or I'll call the cops every damn day. Elon watched him go, the smirk fading into something sharper. Focus. Harold's griping wasn't a roadblock. It was a nudge, a spark. He shut the door and cranked the machine again. That afternoon, Maple Street turned into a circus. Trucks rolled in, unmarked, loaded with crates of metal and glass. Workers in hazmat-looking suits unloaded them, piling stuff outside the garage. The noise went wild, drills screaming, metal clanging, and every few hours, a flash that lit up the block. Harold tried everything. He stuffed towels under his door, didn't help. He blasted the TV to drown it out, useless. By nightfall, after a whirring screech shook his windows, he lost it. He grabbed the phone and dialed the cops again. Harold, it's Jenkins on Maple Street. Musk turned his garage into a damn factory. Lights, noise, the works. Get him out of here. The operator's voice came through, tired. We'll send someone, Mr. Jenkins. Harold hung up, pacing as the red and blue lights showed up again. The same two cops knocked on the garage door, and Elon opened it, dust swirling around him. Officer 1. Musk, we're back. Jenkins says you're at it again. What's with the light show? Elon. Just testing. It's loud, I know, but it's gotta be. This thing's too big to keep quiet. Officer 2. Big or not, people are complaining. Dial it back, or we'll have to do something. Elon nodded, but his jaw tightened. The cops left, and he turned back to the machine, tweaking a dial. The hum softened, but didn't stop. Elon. Fine, I'll play nice, for now. But this is just the beginning. Harold flopped into bed, pulling the pillow over his head. The buzz was still there, sneaking through the walls, a constant nag. He growled into the dark. Harold. He's gonna bury me with this junk. It's never gonna stop. But it didn't stop, it got stranger. Over the next week, the garage became a hive. More trucks, more crates, more flashes. Neighbors started grumbling too. Old Mrs. Carter next door called Harold one night, voice shaking. Mrs. Carter. Harold, what's he doing over there? My dog won't stop barking. Harold. Beats me, Martha. Probably building a UFO. I'm calling the cops again tomorrow. He did, 3 more times that week. The cops got sick of it, brushing him off with, he's not breaking laws, Jenkins, just deal with it. Harold fumed, but the noise kept coming, hums, whirs, flashes that painted the street in eerie light. One night, after a particularly loud buzz woke him, he stormed over again, cane in hand. Harold. Musk. Open this door. I'm done with your crap. Elon cracked it open, looking rough, eyes red, dust caked on his face. He held up a hand. Elon. Hold on, Harold. Look at this before you blow a gasket. He pointed inside. The machine was running, smoother now, a steady hum rolling off it. The air shimmered faintly, and Harold caught a whiff, clean, sharp, like after a rain. It didn't make sense, but it wasn't just noise anymore. Harold. What's that smell? You making air fresheners now? Elon. Not quite. It's a start, something real. Stick around, you'll see. Harold huffed, turning away, but that smell stuck with him. He trudged home, muttering, Harold. Crazy bastard. What if he's not just screwing around? He shook it off, but the thought lingered. Across the street, Elon kept at it, night after night. The flashes softened, the hum steadied. Whatever he was building, it was taking shape. Something wild, something Harold couldn't pin down. And every time he yelled, every time the cops came, Elon just pushed harder, like Harold's complaints were part of the fuel. By late March 2025, Maple Street wasn't just Harold Jenkins' personal hell. It was turning into a full-blown neighborhood freak show. Elon Musk's garage had gone from a one-man noise machine to something bigger, stranger, and impossible to ignore. The hums, whirs, and flashes weren't letting up, and now they were pulling everyone else into the mess. Harold was still the loudest complainer, but he wasn't alone anymore. For Elon, though, every grumble was just another push to keep going, like the whole street was cheering him on in reverse. Harold woke up that third week with a headache that felt like a jackhammer in his skull. The buzz from across the street had been relentless, steady all night, punctuated by random bursts of light that seeped through his curtains. He stumbled to the kitchen, coffee pot shaking in his hands as he brewed a cup. The garage lights were still on, glowing like a stubborn middle finger aimed right at him. He sipped the coffee, cold already, because of course it was, and growled under his breath. Harold, 3 weeks of this crap. He's not human, he's a damn robot. Across the street, Elon was anything but robotic. He was wired, running on fumes and adrenaline, hunched over that hulking machine like it was his lifeline. The garage was a jungle now, crates stacked high, wires snaking across the floor, and glowing tubes pulsing faintly. The air crackled as he flipped a switch, and the hum jumped, vibrating the walls. A shimmer rippled out, stronger than before, and a faint breeze kicked up, sharp and clean. Elon scribbled in his notebook, muttering to himself, "Elon. That's it, bump the output, tighten the flow. We're getting somewhere." He wasn't wrong. Whatever this thing was, it was growing, literally. The machine was taller now, rigged with new parts from those mystery deliveries. The notebook showed sketches of it hooked to bigger setups, arrows swirling around weird labels like cycle rate and feedback loop. It was still a puzzle, even to him, but the pieces were snapping together. Outside, the neighborhood was waking up to the chaos. Old Mrs. Carter next door was on her porch, clutching her yappy little dog as it barked at the garage. Down the street, Jim Riley, a guy who'd lived there since the 80s, was hosing his lawn, eyeballing the trucks parked outside Elon's place. Kids on bikes slowed down, gawking at the flashes. And Harold? He was done playing nice. He grabbed his cane and stormed out, ready to rally the troops. He banged on Mrs. Carter's door first. She cracked it open, dog still yapping. Mrs. Carter. "Harold, what's that nut doing now? My windows rattled all night." Harold. "Beats me, Martha. Probably building a death ray. We gotta stop him. Cops ain't doing squat." She nodded, and Harold moved on to Jim, who was still hosing his grass like it owed him money. Harold. "Jim, you hear that buzzing? Musk's losing it over there. Lights, noise, the whole damn circus." Jim. "Yeah, I hear it. Woke me up at 3. What's he got in there? Some kind of lab?" Harold. "Lab, spaceship, who knows? I'm calling a meeting. We're shutting this down." By noon, half the street was crammed into Harold's living room. Mrs. Carter, Jim, a couple young parents, even the mailman who'd gotten curious. The air was thick with gripes as the hum from the garage leaked through the walls. Mrs. Carter. "My dog hasn't slept in days. He's a nervous wreck." Jim. "I saw guys in weird suits unloading crates yesterday. Looked like hazmat stuff." Harold stood up, cane thumping the floor. Harold. "That's what I'm saying. He's turned that garage into a damn madhouse. We're not putting up with it anymore, cops or no cops." The room buzzed with agreement, and they hatched a plan: flood the police line with calls until someone did something. Harold led the charge, dialing again while the others pulled out their phones. Harold. "It's Jenkins on Maple Street. Musk said it again, noise, lights, trucks everywhere. You gotta shut him down." The operator sounded beat. "We've got multiple calls, Mr. Jenkins. We'll send a unit." Harold hung up, smirking as the room cheered. But across the street, Elon wasn't sweating it. He was elbow deep in the machine, tweaking a valve when the cops rolled up, Same 2, looking like they'd rather be anywhere else. Officer 1. Musk, we've got half the street calling now. What's this thing doing? Elon stepped out, brushing dust off his hands, that glint still in his eyes. Elon. Making waves, literally. It's loud, I get it, but it's worth it. Give it a chance. Officer 2. Folks don't want chances, they want quiet. Cut the noise, or we're coming back with paperwork. Elon nodded, but didn't flinch. The cops left, and he turned back to the machine, cranking it down a notch. The hum softened, but the shimmer in the air got stronger, clean, crisp, like a storm had just passed. Elon. They'll come around. This is too big to stop now. Harold watched from his window, arms crossed, smug as the lights dimmed. But the victory didn't last. That night, the hum crept back, quieter, but sharper, cutting through the dark. Then, flash, a soft burst lit up the street, and a breeze rustled the trees, carrying that same clean smell Harold had caught before. He bolted upright in bed, sniffing the air. Harold. What the hell? He's still at it, and now it stinks weird. He wasn't wrong. The next morning, the street was buzzing, literally and figuratively. Mrs. Carter's dog stopped barking, just sat there sniffing. Jim swore his grass looked greener. Kids ran around, yelling about the cool wind, from nowhere. Harold stormed over to the garage again, cane swinging. Harold. Musk. Open up, what's this smell crap? You poisoning us now? Elon cracked the door, looking rough but wired, like he hadn't slept in days. Elon. Not poison, progress. You're breathing it, Harold. Feel any different? Harold. Different? I feel pissed. You're turning this street into your damn lab. Elon. Maybe. But it's working. Check your air. Cleaner, right? Harold froze, sniffing again. It was cleaner, crisp, like mountain air he hadn't tasted since he was a kid. He shook it off, stomping back home. Harold. Cleaner my ass. He's full of it, always has been. But as he sat at his kitchen table, coffee in hand, that smell wouldn't leave him. The hum kept going, steady, insistent, and the street kept changing. Trees rustled more, the air felt lighter, and Harold couldn't deny it. Something was up. He didn't like it, not one bit, but it was sticking with him, gnawing at the back of his mind. Across the street, Elon pushed on, night after night, the machine growing, the hum tightening. Whatever it wasn't stopping, and Maple Street was along for the ride, whether they liked it or not. April blew into Maple Street in 2025, and the strangeness wasn't letting up, it was cranking up. Elon Musk's garage had gone from a noisy nuisance to a full-blown mystery machine, spitting out hums, flashes, and that sharp, clean smell that was starting to mess with everyone's heads. Harold Jenkins was still the king of complaints, but the neighborhood wasn't just moaning anymore, they were hooked. Something was changing, and even Harold couldn't brush it off. The noise wasn't random chaos now. It was a puzzle, and they were dying to crack it. Harold woke up that first week of April feeling weird. The hum from across the street had been steady all night. No big booms, just a low, non-stop drone that had wormed into his sleep. He shuffled to the kitchen, fired up the coffee pot, and took a sip, hot for once, a rare victory. But as he stood by the window, staring at the garage, that smell hit him again, crisp, clean, like the air up in the mountains he hadn't breathed since he was a kid. It was stronger today, slipping through the cracks. He sniffed, scowling. Harold. What the hell's he up to now? Smells like a damn pine forest in here. Across the street, Elon was in the thick of it. The garage was a jungle, crates ripped open, wires strung up everywhere, and that machine hulking bigger than ever. It had grown taller, rigged with extra tubes and a slow-spinning vent that looked like a fan on steroids. He twisted a dial, and the hum tightened, sending out a shimmer that danced through the air. The clean smell rolled off it in waves, and Elon grinned, jotting notes in a book already bursting with sketches and numbers. Elon. Outputs holding, conversions climbing. Step 1's locking in, here we go. The notebook was a mess, graphs scribbled over sketches of towers with vents, arrows swirling around words like intake, and release. It was still a jumble, but the machine was doing something real. The air around it felt lighter, fresher, and every tweak pushed it further. Outside, Maple Street was buzzing with more than just the sound. Mrs. Carter's yappy dog wasn't barking anymore. It was sniffing the air, tail wagging like crazy. Jim Riley's lawn looked greener, blades standing tall like they'd gotten a shot of life. Kids ran around, yelling about how the breeze felt. Magic. Harold felt it too. His creaky old lungs weren't fighting as hard when he stepped outside. He didn't trust it, not one damn bit, but it was there, staring him in the face. That afternoon, the neighborhood crew piled into Harold's living room again. Mrs. Carter, Jim, a few others, all riled up. The hum leaked through the walls, steady and sharp, and that clean smell hung thick in the air. Mrs. Carter. Harold, my asthma's been better all week. I don't get it, what's he doing over there? Jim. My grass hasn't looked this good since the 90s. And that smell, it's like the air's brand new. Harold slammed his cane on the floor, cutting through the chatter. Harold. Brand new? It's Musk screwing with us. He's pumping out some chemical junk, probably to brainwash us or something. But even as he barked it out, he wasn't so sure. The air was different, too clean for LA's smoggy haze, too fresh for a street choked with car exhaust. The group started tossing out theories, voices overlapping. Mrs. Carter. Maybe it's one of those air purifiers. My sister's got a little one, makes her place smell nice. Jim. No way, too big for that. I saw those tubes. It's like he's sucking something in and spitting something else out. Harold. Sucking what? Our sanity? I say we bust in there and see what's what. They didn't bust in, not yet, but the idea took root. Harold grabbed his cane and led the pack across the street, the posse trailing behind like a ragtag army. He banged on the garage door, hard enough to shake it loose. Harold. Musk. Open this damn door. We want to know what you're up to. Elon cracked it open, looking beat, eyes red, dust caked on his face, but still wired. He stepped out, brushing his hands on his jeans. Elon. Hey, Harold. Bringing the whole gang, huh? What's the beef this time? Harold jabbed his cane toward the garage. Harold. The beef's that smell. And the hum and the lights, what's this thing doing? You poisoning us or what? Elon. Poisoning? Nah, it's the opposite. It's cleaning something up. Take a deep breath, feel that. Harold sniffed, grudgingly. The air hit his lungs, crisp, light, like he'd stepped out of the city and into the wild. The others sniffed too, murmuring. Mrs. Carter. It is cleaner. Like when I visited my cousin in Oregon. Jim. Yeah, but how? What's it cleaning, smog or something? Elon leaned against the doorframe, that half-smirk creeping up. Elon. Smog's a good start. This thing's pulling junk out of the air, making it better. You're breathing the proof. Harold. Pulling junk? What junk? You're full of it. Give us a straight answer. Elon. Straight as I can right now. It's a work in progress. Think of it like a big filter. Give it time, you'll see. Harold huffed, turning to stomp off, the group trailing him. Harold. Filter my ass. He's just stalling. Probably some scam. But as he hobbled back, that clean air stuck with him. The posse dispersed, muttering theories. Air purifier, smog eater, some sci-fi gizmo. Harold flopped into his chair at home, coffee in hand, staring out the window. The hum kept rolling, steady now, and another faint flash lit up the dusk. The air stayed crisp, and he couldn't shake it. That night, he dug out an old factory manual, something about air systems he'd worked on decades back. He flipped through, squinting at diagrams, trying to match them to what he'd glimpsed in the garage. Filters, vents, intakes, none of it fit, but it was close. He muttered to himself, Harold. Pulling junk out, cleaning the air? What's he filtering? Carbon or some crap? He tossed the book aside, but the gears were turning. The next day, the street kept changing. Birds chirped louder, the haze over LA seemed thinner, and Jim swore his allergies were gone. Harold stormed over again, cane swinging. Harold. Musk. Open up. What's this thing sucking out of the air? Carbon? Smog? Spill it. Elon cracked the door, grinning through the exhaustion. Elon. You're getting warm, Harold. It's grabbing the bad stuff, spitting out the good. Like I said, stick around. Harold. Bad stuff? That's all you got? You're hiding something. Elon. Not hiding, just building. You'll figure it out when it's ready. Harold stomped off, but the clean air followed him home. He sat at his table, sniffing, thinking. The hum kept going, tighter, stronger, and Maple Street was shifting under it. Whatever Elon was up to, it wasn't just noise anymore. It was something real, something big, and Harold was starting to wonder if he'd been wrong all along. By mid-April 2025, Maple Street wasn't just weird, it was hooked. Elon Musk's garage had gone from a neighborhood nuisance to a full-blown obsession, and folks couldn't stop talking about it. The hums, the flashes, that clean air, it was all adding up to something nobody could ignore, not even Harold Jenkins. He was still mad as hell, but the questions were piling up faster than the complaints. And Elon? He was ready to let a little truth slip, just enough to shake things loose. Harold woke up that morning with a cough that didn't stick around. The buzz from the garage had been steady all night, low and tight, like a heartbeat syncing with the street. He shuffled to the kitchen, brewed his coffee, and cracked the window. That smell hit him again, crisp, fresh, like the smog had taken a vacation. He sipped his coffee, hot for once, and squinted at the garage. The lights were still on, but now a faint mist rolled out, shimmering in the dawn. Harold. What's this now? Fog machine? He's turning my yard into a damn movie set. Across the street, Elon was in overdrive. The garage was a chaotic masterpiece. Wires everywhere, crates busted open, and that machine towering over it all. It was rigged with new vents and a spinning fan, humming smoother than ever. He flipped a switch, and the mist thickened, carrying that clean smell stronger than before. He checked a gauge, nodded, and muttered to himself, Elon. Carbon's dropping, oxygen's climbing. Step 2's kicking in, time to scale it up. The notebook was open, pages crammed with new data, charts showing carbon levels dipping, oxygen spiking, and sketches of bigger machines linked across a grid. It wasn't a guess anymore. This was the atmospheric renewer, a beast built to suck carbon out of the air and spit out breathable oxygen. Elon had cracked the first piece, and Maple Street was his test run. Outside, the neighborhood was buzzing, literally. Mrs. Carter's dog was chasing the mist, tail wagging like crazy. Jim Riley stood on his lawn, sniffing the air, his old truck idling cleaner than it had in decades. Kids darted around, giggling about the magic fog. Harold saw it all from his porch, cane in hand, jaw tight. His lungs felt lighter again, too light, and it was ticking him off. Harold, this ain't right. Air's too damn clean. Musk's up to something sneaky. He rounded up the crew again. Mrs. Carter, Jim, Sarah the young mom, a few others, packing his living room by noon. The hum leaped in, steady and sharp, and that mist crept under the door, carrying that fresh smell. The room was a mix of awe and anger. Mrs. Carter. My allergies are gone, completely. What's he pumping out there? Jim. My truck's running like new, no smoke. It's gotta be that machine. Sarah. My kid hasn't used his inhaler all week. I'm starting to think it's not poison. Harold slammed his cane down, cutting through the chatter. Harold. Not poison? Then what? He's turning us into lab rats. I say we bust in and find out. The room hesitated, half nodding, half unsure. Jim rubbed his chin, eyeing the mist. Jim. Maybe we don't bust in, maybe we ask. Something's working here. Harold grunted, but the idea stuck. They marched across the street, Harold leading with his cane like a war banner. He pounded on the garage door, loud enough to wake the dead. Harold. Musk. Open this damn door, we're done guessing. What's this crap you're pumping out? The door creaked open, and Elon stepped out, goggles off, dust caked on his face. He looked at the crowd, Harold fuming, Mrs. Carter clutching her dog, Jim and Sarah hanging back, and grinned. Elon. Hey neighbors. You're breathing it, right? That's the atmospheric renewer, pulls carbon from the air, kicks out oxygen. Like a reset button. Harold blinked, cane frozen midair. The name hit like a brick. Atmospheric renewer? Carbon? Oxygen? Harold. Hey, what now? You're sucking carbon? What's that supposed to do, make us glow? Elon. Not glow, breathe. You've noticed it, haven't you? Cleaner air, lighter lungs? Mrs. Carter. My allergies, my dog's happy. That's you? Jim. My truck runs like a dream. You're fixing the air? Elon nodded, leaning against the doorframe. Elon. Fixing it, yeah? This is just the start, small scale. Maple Street's the guinea pig, and it's working. Sarah. So my kid's breathing better because of this? Why didn't you say so? Elon. Didn't want to jinx it. Had to test it first, make sure it's real. Harold wasn't buying it, not all the way. He jabbed his cane at Elon. Harold. Real? You've been blasting us with noise and lights for weeks. What's the catch? Gonna charge us for this air? Elon. No catch, no charge. Just proving a point. Stick around, it's gonna get bigger. The crowd swapped looks, stunned, curious, still a little mad. Harold huffed, turning back. Harold. Bigger? You're already a pain in my ass. This better not blow up in our faces. He stormed off, the others trailing slower, whispering among themselves. Mrs. Carter sniffed the air again. Jim kicked his truck's tire, clean as a whistle. Sarah hugged her kid tighter. Harold flopped into his chair at home, coffee cold again, muttering. Harold. Atmospheric whatever, sounds like a scam. Cleaner air my foot. But as he sat there, the mist rolled in, and he took a deep breath, deeper than he had in years. His chest didn't rattle, his cough didn't come. He shook it off, grumbling. Harold. Damn it, he's getting to me. What's next, flying pigs? Across the street, Elon cranked the machine again, the hum tightening. The mist thickened, spreading past the garage, curling around the block. The atmospheric renewal was alive, small, messy, but real, and Maple Street was just the beginning. Harold didn't want to admit it, but that name, that idea, was sticking with him, gnawing at his stubborn streak. Something was brewing, and it wasn't stopping anytime soon. Mid-May 2025 had Maple Street buzzing, literally and figuratively. Elon Musk's garage wasn't just a noisy nuisance anymore. It was a full-blown mystery spilling out into the neighborhood. The hums were steadier, the flashes rarer, but that clean, crisp air was everywhere now, and it was starting to click for folks. Harold Jenkins was still the king of complaints, rallying the troops against it. But even he couldn't ignore the pieces falling into place. For Elon, every grumble was just another sign he was onto something huge. Harold woke up that morning with a crick in his neck and a headache that wouldn't quit. The hum from across the street had been a constant drone all night. No big bangs, just a steady pulse that warmed into his sleep. He shuffled to the kitchen, brewed his coffee, and cracked the window. That smell hit him again, sharp, fresh, like he'd wandered into a pine forest instead of a smoggy LA suburb. He sipped his coffee, still hot, and squinted at the garage. The lights were on, as always, but the air felt thicker, cleaner. Harold. What's that lunatic up to now? Turning my yard into a damn air freshener? Across the street, Elon was in the zone. The garage was a chaos of wires, crates, and that machine, taller now, rigged with spinning vents and glowing tubes. He adjusted a valve, and the hum tightened, sending out a shimmer that rippled through the air. A cool breeze rolled off it, carrying that clean scent stronger than ever. He grinned, scribbling in his notebook, pages crammed with new diagrams, towers linked by lines, arrows circling words like carbon pull, and O2 kick. Elon. Convergence spiking, range is holding. This baby's ready to stretch its legs. He wasn't messing around. The machine was doing something to the air, sucking in the thick, dirty stuff and spitting out something fresher. It was still a garage rig, but the signs were there, and Maple Street was the test bed, Outside, the neighborhood was waking up to it. Mrs. Carter's yappy dog was calm, sniffing the air like it was a treat. Jim Riley's lawn was lush, greener than it had been in years, and his old truck didn't cough black smoke anymore. Kids ran around, laughing about how the air's bouncy. Harold saw it all from his porch, cane in hand, and it was gnawing at him. He'd been fighting this for weeks. Cops, meetings, the works. But now, folks weren't just griping. They were asking questions. That afternoon, Harold called the crew back to his living room. Mrs. Carter, Jim, Sarah the young mom, a few others. The hum leaked in, steady and sharp, and that clean smell hung heavy. The room buzzed with chatter. Mrs. Carter. My allergies are gone, haven't sneezed in days. What's he doing over there? Jim. My grass is growing like crazy, and my truck's running smooth. It's gotta be that machine. Sarah. My kid's asthma's better, hardly uses his inhaler now. Maybe it's not all bad. Harold slammed his cane down, cutting through the noise. Harold. Not bad? He's pumping something into the air, probably some chemical trick. We're lab rats, and I ain't falling for it. But even as he said it, he wasn't so sure. The air was cleaner, too clean for LA, too fresh for a street drowning in smog. Jim leaned forward, scratching his head. Jim. Hold up, Harold. I saw those vents on that thing, big ones, sucking stuff in. What if it's cleaning the air like a giant filter? Mrs. Carter. A filter? My sister's got one, makes her house smell nice. But this is bigger. Harold. Bigger? It's a damn monster. Cleaning the air, sounds like a scam to me. Sarah. Maybe it's pulling the bad stuff out. Like the smog? My kid's breathing easier, can't argue with that. Harold glared, but the idea stuck. Smog, LA was choked with it, always had been. Could Musk be sucking it up somehow? He shook it off, but the room was turning. They weren't just mad now, they were digging. That evening, word spread beyond the street. A news van rolled up, local station, mic and camera ready. Harold spotted it and hobbled over, ready to unload. Harold. Hey! You hear about that nut job? He's been driving us crazy, noise, lights, now messing with the air. The reporter, Lisa, turned to him, mic out. Lisa. We've got reports of cleaner air on this street, better than downtown. You're across from Musk, right? What's he up to? Harold. Beats me. Some machine, hums all night, flashes like a disco. Now the air's weird, probably dosing us with something. Lisa scribbled, but before Harold could keep going, Elon stepped out, dust on his jacket, that glint in his eyes. The camera swung to him. Elon. Dosing? Nah, Harold, it's the opposite. This thing's pulling junk out, making it better. Lisa. Mr. Musk, what's it doing to the air? People say it's cleaner here, what's the machine? Elon. It's an experiment, grabbing the bad stuff, kicking out the good. Starting small, but it's rolling. Lisa. Bad stuff, like pollution? Carbon? Elon. Something like that. Give it time, you'll see more. He ducked back inside, leaving Lisa blinking and Harold fuming. The news crew stuck around, filming the garage, talking to neighbors. Jim piped up, scratching his neck. Jim. Air's cleaner, my truck's proof. Maybe he's sucking up the smog or something. Mrs. Carter. My dog's happy, smells like a park now. I don't get it, but I ain't mad. Harold stormed off, cane thumping, muttering loud. Harold. Sucking up smog? Full of crap, he's just blowing smoke. But that night, he couldn't shake it. The hum kept going, steady, insistent, and the air stayed crisp. He cracked his window wider, sniffing hard. It was cleaner, fresher than he'd ever breathed in LA. He sat at his kitchen table, coffee cold again, staring at the garage lights. Harold. Pulling junk out? What's that even mean? He's still a lunatic, but what if? The thought gnawed at him. Across the street, Elon pushed on, tweaking the machine. The vents spun faster, the shimmer spread wider, and the clean air rolled out in waves. Whatever it was growing, And Maple Street was starting to figure it out, one breath at a time. Alright, let's move to chapter 7 of Elon Musk's neighbor hates his latest obsession, until it rewrites the future. Written in American English, audiobook style, and targeting around 20,000 characters. Per your request, I'll now include a full spoiler, revealing that Elon's machine is the atmospheric renewer, a device that pulls carbon dioxide from the air, converts it into oxygen, and reverses climate damage on a scalable level. It's no longer a slow tease. Harold and the neighbors will confront the truth head-on here. It'll stay TDS-friendly, quotes only in dialogue, with the humorous, personal, and inspiring tone intact. Here we go. Elon Musk's neighbor hates his latest obsession, until it rewrites the future. Chapter 7. The big reveal. Late May 2025 hit Maple Street like a freight train, and the weirdness wasn't just a mystery anymore. It was staring everyone in the face. Elon Musk's garage had been humming, flashing, and pumping out clean air for weeks, turning the neighborhood into a petri dish for something wild. Harold Jenkins was still the loudest voice against it, swearing it was all a trick, but the cracks in his wall of doubt were widening. The news crew had stirred the pot, and now the truth was about to spill out, whether Harold liked it or not. Harold woke up that morning with a cough that didn't come. The hum from across the street had been steady all night, no flashes, just a low, constant drone that had become white noise. He shuffled to the kitchen, brewed his coffee, and cracked the window. The air hit him, crisp, clean, like he'd stepped into a forest instead of a smog-choked suburb. It was stronger now, undeniable, and his lungs felt lighter than they had in years. He sipped his coffee, hot for once, and glared at the garage. Harold, what's that nut job doing now? Making my coffee taste better too? Across the street, Elon was in the thick of it. The garage was a fortress of tech, wires everywhere, crates unpacked, and the machine towering in the center. It was rigged with spinning vents, glowing tubes, and a new panel blinking with data. He flipped a switch, and the hum tightened, sending out a shimmer that rippled wide. The clean air poured out, cool and sharp, spreading past the garage walls. He checked a meter, grinning as numbers climbed, and scribbled in his notebook, Elon. Carbon's dropping, oxygen spiking. This is the atmospheric renewer, full blast now. The notebook laid it bare, sketches of towers sucking CO2 from the sky, converting it to O2, and pumping it back out. It wasn't just an experiment anymore. It was a weapon against climate collapse, and Maple Street was the proving ground. Outside, the neighborhood was buzzing with more than just the hum. Mrs. Carter's dog was prancing, sniffing the air like it was a buffet. Jim Riley's lawn was a jungle, greener than ever, and his truck purred without a hint of smoke. Kids ran around, laughing about how the air's alive. Harold saw it all from his porch, cane in hand, and it was driving him up the wall. The news van from last week had lit a fuse. People weren't just guessing now. They were demanding answers. That afternoon, the street erupted. Another news van rolled up, bigger this time, network logos splashed on the side. Lisa, the local reporter, was back, mic ready, camera rolling. A crowd gathered, neighbors, gawkers, even a few suits who looked out of place. Harold hobbled over, ready to unload. Harold. Hey you! Tell on that maniac's been torturing us. Noise, lights, now this air crap. Lisa turned to him, mic out. Lisa. Mr. Jenkins, air quality tests show this street's cleaner than anywhere in LA. You're across from Musk. What's he building? Harold. Beats me. Some machine. Hums all day, smells funny. Probably a scam to sell us something. Before he could keep going, Elon stepped out, dust on his jacket, notebook in hand. The camera swung to him, and the crowd hushed. Harold froze, cane mid-thump. Elon. Scam? Nah, Harold, it's real. This is the atmospheric renewer, pulls carbon dioxide out of the air, turns it into oxygen. Climate fix right here. Lisa. Carbon dioxide? You mean it's fighting pollution, like a giant air purifier? Elon. Bigger than that. It's reversing what we've done, cleaning the mess, one street at a time. Maple's the start. The crowd murmured, heads turning. Harold blinked, mouth open, then snapped it shut. Harold. Carbon what? You're telling me that noisy junk's fixing the air? Bull. Elon flipped open his notebook, showing Lisa a graph. CO2 levels dropping, O2 rising, right there on Maple Street. Elon. Not bull, data. Look around. Your air's cleaner, your lungs know it. This is just the prototype. Lisa. Prototype for what? How big does this get? Elon. Big as the planet if I nail it. Towers everywhere. Suck up the bad, pump out the good. No more choking. The suits in the crowd, turns out they were from some environmental group, stepped forward, eyes wide. One guy, a balding dude in a tie, spoke up. Suit. You're saying this could reverse climate change? That's insane. How's it work? Elon. Simple. Grabs CO2, breaks it down, spits out oxygen. Scales up, and we're breathing easy again. Harold shoved through, cane waving. Harold. Simple? You've been driving me nuts for months. Noise, lights, trucks. Now you say it's saving the world? Elon. Yeah, Harold. Your complaining kept me going, pushed me to prove it. Thanks for that. The crowd laughed, and Harold turned red, sputtering. Harold. Thanks? I'll give you thanks. Shove that machine where the sun don't shine. But the laughter faded as folks started sniffing the air, nodding. Mrs. Carter piped up, dog in her arms. Mrs. Carter. My allergies are gone, dog's happy too. If it's cleaning the air, I ain't mad. Jim. My truck's running clean, grass looks like a golf course. Maybe he's onto something. Sarah, the young mom, hugged her kid, who was breathing easy. Sarah. No inhaler today. If it's real, I'm sold. Harold stormed off, muttering loud. Harold. Sold? You're all nuts. He's still a damn menace. But that night, he couldn't shake it. The hum kept rolling, steady, strong, and the air stayed fresh. He sat at his kitchen table, coffee cold again, staring at the garage lights. He cracked the window wider, took a deep breath, clean, sharp, better than he'd ever known in LA. The news played on his old TV, Lisa's voice cutting through. Lisa. Elon Musk claims his atmospheric renewer could reverse climate damage, starting right here on Maple Street. Experts are skeptical, but the air tells a different story. Harold clicked it off, leaning back. His lungs felt good, too good. He muttered to himself. Harold. Fixing the climate? That noisy bastard might have done it. But I ain't saying thanks yet. Across the street, Elon pushed the machine harder. The vents spun faster, the shimmers spread wider, and the clean air rolled out in waves. The atmospheric renewer was out of the bag, Maple Street was proof, and the world was watching. June 2025 crashed onto Maple Street like a tidal wave, and Elon Musk's atmospheric renewer wasn't just a garage secret anymore. It was a headline screaming across the planet. The clean air rolling out of that beat-up suburb had turned heads, from neighbors to newsrooms to big shots who didn't know Maple Street from a hole in the ground. Harold Jenkins was still grumbling, clinging to his grudge like a lifeline, but even he couldn't dodge the spotlight. For Elon, it was go time. The future he'd been chasing was here, and it was loud. Harold woke up that first week of June to a racket that wasn't a hum. The street outside was a circus, news vans lined up, cameras flashing, people shouting. He shuffled to the window, coffee sloshing in his mug, and froze. The garage across the street was surrounded, reporters, suits, even a helicopter buzzing overhead. That clean air was thicker now, crisp and cool, like he'd woken up in the Rockies instead of LA. He took a sip, cold already, and muttered, Harold, what the hell's this now? That lunatic's turned my street into a damn zoo. Across the way, Elon was in the eye of the storm. The garage door was wide open, the atmospheric renewer hulking in the center, vents spinning, tubes glowing, pumping out fresh air like a factory. He stood in front of it, dust on his jacket, fielding questions from a dozen mics. The notebook was tucked under his arm, pages worn from weeks of scribbling. The hum was steady, a heartbeat under the chaos, and he was grinning like a kid who just won the science fair. Elon. Yeah, it's the real deal. grabs CO2, spits out oxygen. Maple Street's the proof. Check your air quality stats. A reporter, a slick guy from a national network, shoved a mic closer. Reporter: Mr. Musk, you're saying this reverses climate change? How's one machine doing that? Elon: one machine's the start. Scale it up. Towers everywhere. And we're not just slowing the mess, we're fixing it. The crowd buzzed, cameras rolling. Harold watched from his porch, cane in hand, jaw tight. The news from last week had blown up. Lisa's local report went viral, and now the big guns were here. He hobbled over, shoving through the throng, ready to crash the party. Harold: hey, tell 'em the truth. That thing's been hell for months. Noise, lights, now this circus. Elon spotted him, that glint in his eyes flashing. Elon: Harold's right, it was loud. Had to be. But hell? Nah, it's heaven now, breathe it in. The reporters laughed, and Harold turned red, waving his cane. Harold: heaven? You've been driving me nuts since March. This ain't no fix, it's a damn takeover. But the crowd wasn't listening, they were sniffing the air, nodding. Mrs. Carter pushed through, dog tucked under her arm. Mrs. Carter: my allergies are gone, best I've felt in years. Whatever it is, it's working. Jim Riley chimed in, scratching his head. Jim: my truck's clean as a whistle, grass looks like a golf course. Gotta give him that. Sarah, the young mom, held her kid's hand, smiling. Sarah: no inhaler all week. If this is climate change getting fixed, I'm in. Harold spun on them, fuming. Harold: you're all crazy. He's turned us into lab rats. Now the world's gawking. He wasn't wrong about the gawking. By noon, Maple Street was a madhouse. More vans, drones overhead, even a couple scientists in lab coats poking around. One of them, a wiry woman with glasses, hooked up a gadget near the garage, watching numbers climb. Scientist: CO2's down 40% here. Oxygen's up. This is nuts. Works better than our models. Elon overheard, strolling over. Elon: better's the goal. Next step's a grid. Towers across LA, then the coast. The scientist blinked, scribbling fast, but Harold caught it, stomping closer. Harold: towers? You're gonna litter my city with these noisy bastards? Elon: yeah, Harold. Noisy bastards that'll save your grandkids' air. You're welcome. Harold sputtered, but the crowd was eating it up. Cameras rolling, phones out. That night, the story hit every screen. CNN, BBC, social media exploding. Headlines screamed: Musk's machine cleans LA air, climate fix real? Maple Street was trending, and Harold's phone wouldn't stop ringing. Neighbors, old factory buddies, even his cousin in Ohio. Cousin: Harold, you're on TV. That Musk guy's fixing the planet, right across from you. Harold: fixing? He's wrecking my life. Noise woke me up for months. Cousin: but the air, my buddy in LA says it's cleaner already. You're famous. Harold hung up, muttering. Harold: famous? I'm cursed, stuck next to that lunatic. But he couldn't dodge it. The air stayed fresh, too fresh, and his lungs felt good, better than they had in decades. He cracked the window wider, TV blaring with experts debating the renewer. One guy, a climate bigwig, sounded stunned. Expert: if Musk scales this, towers sucking CO2 globally, it could roll back decades of damage. Insane, but the data's solid. Harold clicked it off, slumping in his chair. The hum kept going, steady, strong, and the street glowed with camera lights. He took a deep breath, clean, sharp, undeniable. Harold: saving the planet? That noisy jerk might have pulled it off. But I ain't clapping yet. Across the street, Elon pushed the machine harder. The vents spun faster, the shimmer stretched wider, and the clean air rolled out in waves. The world was watching now. Maple Street was the spark, and the atmospheric renewer was ready to burn bright. July 2025 turned Maple Street into a name everybody knew, and Elon Musk's atmospheric renewer wasn't just a garage gimmick anymore. It was rewriting the rules. The clean air that started as a weird quirk was rolling out of that LA suburb, creeping into the city, and catching eyes across the globe. Harold Jenkins was still dug in, swearing it was all a fluke, but the world wasn't waiting for him to catch up. For Elon, it was full speed ahead. The future he'd built in that noisy garage was taking off, and it was dragging everyone along. Harold woke up that first week of July to a quiet he hadn't heard in months. The hum from across the street was gone, or so faint he couldn't tell. He shuffled to the kitchen, brewed his coffee, and cracked the window. The air hit him, crisp, cool, like he'd woken up in a forest instead of a city choking on smog. It was everywhere now, not just his yard, and his lungs sucked it in easy, no wheeze, no fight. He sipped his coffee, hot this time, and squinted at the garage. The lights were off, doors shut, no chaos. Harold, what's that nut job up to now? Finally blow himself up? Across the street, the garage was empty, for once. Elon wasn't there. The atmospheric renewal was still inside, vents spinning slow, pumping out clean air on autopilot, but he moved the game elsewhere. A mile away, at a warehouse he'd snapped up overnight, a dozen bigger machines were firing up, taller, louder, rigged with tech that made the garage rig look like a toy. He stood in the middle, dust on his jacket, watching meters climb as the air shimmered wide. Elon. LA's next, then the coast. These babies will suck up decades of junk in months. His notebook was open, pages showing a grid, towers dotting the city, then the state, then beyond. The Maple Street prototype had proved it. CO2 down, oxygen up, climate damage peeling back. Now, it was scaling, and fast. Back on Maple Street, the neighborhood was a ghost of its old self. The news vans were gone, chasing Elon's new spot, but the air stayed clean, cleaner than ever. Mrs. Carter's dog trotted around, tail wagging like it owned the place. Jim Riley's lawn was a jungle, and his truck purred without a hiccup. Kids played outside longer, no coughing, no whining about the heat. Harold saw it all from his porch, cane tapping, and it was grinding his gears. Harold, they're all acting like he's a damn hero. It's still a trick, mark my words. But the trick was playing out big. That afternoon, Harold flipped on the TV, and every channel was blaring it. Musk's renewal hits LA, air quality soars. Drone shots showed the warehouse, machines humming, clean air rolling out in waves. A news anchor, all polished and loud, cut through. Anchor. Air quality indexes in Los Angeles are the best in a century. CO2 levels dropping fast. Experts say if Musk towers spread, we could see climate damage reverse in years, not decades. Harold clicked it off, muttering, Harold. Years? Took him months to ruin my life. Now he's fixing the world? He wasn't wrong about the months. Since March, that garage had been his personal hell. Noise, lights, chaos. But now, the hell was quiet, and the air was something else. He stepped outside, cane thumping, and caught Jim watering his jungle of a lawn. Harold. Jim, you buying this? Musk's gone. Left that damn machine running like a ghost. Jim. Yeah, I buy it. Air's clean all the way to downtown. My buddy there says it's like breathing new. He's got more of them now, big ones. Harold. Big ones? Great. More noise somewhere else. Jim laughed, shaking his head. Jim. Maybe. But my truck's purring, and I ain't coughing. You gotta admit, it's something. Harold huffed, hobbling off, but the something stuck. That evening, Mrs. Carter knocked on his door, dog tucked under her arm. Mrs. Carter. Harold, you see the news? They're saying Maple Street started it. Our air's famous. Harold. Famous? We're guinea pigs, always have been. Mrs. Carter. Guinea pigs who can breathe. My asthma's gone, yours too, I bet. Harold waved her off, but she wasn't wrong. His chest felt lighter, no rattle, no fight. He shut the door, muttering, Harold, asthma's one thing, doesn't mean he's not a menace. That night, the street was quiet, too quiet without the hum. But the air kept coming, clean and cool, spilling out from the garage rig. Harold cracked his window wider, TV on low. A scientist was talking, voice sharp with awe. Scientist. Musk's atmospheric renewer is a game changer. CO2's dropping across LA, oxygen's up 10%. If he grids this globally, we're looking at a reset, decades of damage undone. Harold clicked it off, slumping in his chair. He took a deep breath, clean, sharp, better than he'd ever known. The world was changing, and it had started right there, across the street. He muttered to himself, "Harold, reset? That noisy bastard did it. But I ain't cheering yet." Across town, Elon pushed the new machines harder. The vents roared, the shimmer stretched miles, and the clean air rolled out fast. Maple Street was just the spark. Now LA was burning with it, and the planet was next. August 2025 swept over Maple Street like a fresh wind, and Elon Musk's atmospheric renewer wasn't just a local oddity anymore. It was a global lifeline. The clean air that started in that noisy garage had spread from LA to the coast, then across borders, turning heads and rewriting the planet's future. Harold Jenkins was still the grumpiest holdout, but even he couldn't outrun the truth. For Elon, it was the end of one fight and the start of something bigger. The noise that drove Harold nuts had lit up the world. Harold woke up that last week of August to a stillness he hadn't felt in months. The hum from across the street was gone. The garage sat quiet, lights off, doors shut. He shuffled to the kitchen, brewed his coffee, and cracked the window. The air rolled in, crisp, clean, like he'd woken up on a mountaintop instead of a suburb that used to choke on smog. His lungs took it in easy, no rasp, no struggle. He sipped his coffee, hot, a small miracle, and squinted at the silence. "Harold, what's that lunatic done now? Finally give up?" He was wrong. Elon hadn't given up. He'd won. The garage was empty because the atmospheric renewer had outgrown it. Across LA, towers were rising, tall, sleek versions of the prototype, humming low as they sucked CO2 from the sky and pumped out oxygen. Beyond the city, more were popping up: San Francisco, Seattle, then overseas in Tokyo, Mumbai, London. The warehouse rigs from July had been the spark. Now the grid was live, and the world was breathing it. Back on Maple Street, the neighborhood was a shadow of its old self, quiet, but alive. Mrs. Carter's dog pranced around, tail wagging like it owned the block. Jim Riley's lawn was a forest, and his truck purred cleaner than ever. Kids played outside, no masks, no coughing, laughing in air that felt new. Harold saw it all from his porch, cane tapping slow, and it was sinking in, grudgingly. "Harold, they're all acting like he's a damn saint. Still a menace to me." But the menace had gone global. That afternoon, Harold flipped on the TV, and it was everywhere. Musk's renewer grid goes live, climate clock ticks back. Drone shots showed towers humming across cities, clean air rolling out in waves. A news anchor, voice sharp with awe, cut through. "Anchor. CO2 levels are dropping worldwide, fastest decline in history. Oxygen's up 15% in grid zones. Experts say Musk's atmospheric renewer could reverse a century of climate damage by 2035. Harold clicked it off, muttering, "Harold, 2035? Took him 6 months to wreck my peace. Now he's fixing the planet?" He wasn't wrong about the 6 months. Since March, that garage had been his nightmare: noise, lights, chaos. But now, the nightmare was over, and the air was something else. He stepped outside, cane thumping, and caught Jim on his porch, reading a paper with a headline, "Maple Street, where it all began." Jim. "Hey, Harold says here we're famous. Air's clean from here to Japan. Your pal Musk did it." Harold. "Pal? That noisy bastard's no pal of mine. Just glad he's gone." Jim laughed, folding the paper. "Jim. Gone, sure, but the air's still here. My lungs say thanks, even if you won't." Harold huffed, but the thanks stuck. That evening, Mrs. Carter stopped by, dog in tow, grinning wide. Mrs. Carter. "Harold, they're naming a park after us, Maple Street Park. Air's so clean, they're planting trees downtown." Harold. "Trees? Great, more stuff to block my view." Mrs. Carter. "Oh, hush, you're breathing better too. Admit it." He waved her off, but she was right. His chest felt clear, no wheeze, no fight. He shut the door, muttering, "Harold, breathing's one thing, doesn't mean I like him." That night, the street was calm, no hum, no chaos. But the air kept coming, clean and cool, spilling from the garage rig still ticking away on low. Harold cracked his window wide, TV on low. A scientist was talking, voice thick with wonder. Scientist. Musk's grid is a miracle. CO2's down globally, oxygen's climbing. By 2035, we could hit pre-industrial levels. It started in that garage. Insane. Harold clicked it off, slumping in his chair. He took a deep breath, clean, sharp, better than he'd ever known. The world had changed, and it had kicked off right there, across the street. He muttered to himself, "Harold, pre-industrial?" That noisy jerk pulled it off. "Guess I'll live with it." A knock broke the quiet. Elon, standing on his porch, dust on his jacket, that glint in his eyes. Harold opened the door, scowl ready. "Harold, what now, Musk? Come to gloat?" Elon, "Nah, Harold, just checking in. Air's good, right? Towers are up, thought you'd wanna know." Harold, "Good? It's air, don't get cocky. You still owe me 6 months of sleep." Elon grinned, stepping back. "Elon, fair. But you kept me sharp, pushed me to make it work. So thanks, neighbor." Harold blinked, cane midair, then snorted. "Harold, thanks? Shove it, I ain't your cheerleader." Elon laughed, heading off into the night. Harold shut the door, muttering, "Harold, crazy bastard. Save the world, maybe, but he's still a damn nuisance." He sat back, coffee cold again, and took another breath, clean, fresh, alive. The noise was gone, but the legacy stayed. Maple Street, where it all started, breathing easy at last.